that's great. Like, that's obviously a powerful statement. I think that's relevant, and we're going to get to that in just a couple minutes. But he also has this conversation with Peter in Matthew chapter 18, where Peter comes up to him and says, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? 7 times in a row? And Jesus' answer is, yeah, times 70. You got to think about this the way Peter's thinking about it. He came up to the teacher and thought, I'm going to throw out the biggest number that I can think of that is reasonable. What if someone takes advantage of me 7 times in a row? And Jesus is like, times 10, times 70. You're telling me I'm supposed to sit here and let someone treat me wrong 490 times in a row? What are you talking about? What reality are you living in, Jesus, where that makes any kind of sense? Okay, well, he also says things like in Ephesians chapter 4 that you're to be kind to one another. This is Paul writing. He says, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. So there's clearly a connection between our forgiveness that we get from God and the forgiveness that we give to other people. Jesus, in his view of reality, seems to think that forgiveness is something that we should just be oozing all the time, that it should just be coming out of us, overflowing out of us. Okay, let's back up a little bit and just ask, what is forgiveness? Because here's a problem that we run into. Sometimes we think Jesus is saying things that he's not saying because we don't define our terms. We don't ask, what does he mean when he says forgiveness? When we think of forgiveness, we often have some ideas that are not what forgiveness is. So, in order to understand forgiveness a little bit better, quickly, we're going to talk about what forgiveness is not, okay? Here's what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not justification, okay? Forgiving someone is not giving them an excuse as to why they did something wrong to you. Right? If you're driving on the highway, Courtney does this to me all the time. She does it to me all the time. That person, maybe a different nickname, cut me off or isn't paying attention or they're on their phone and I'm angry at them for that. Well, Joseph, you don't know what's happening. Maybe they're worried. That's not forgiveness. That's justification, right? So-and-so in my family treated me poorly. Well, it's okay. They've had a long day. That's not forgiveness. That's justification. There's a place for it. It's not an evil thing, but if we're being precise, it's not forgiveness. It's justifying what the person did. If they did something wrong, it's giving them a reason why what they did was okay. Justification. Second thing, forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not a lack of boundaries, all right? When we say forgiveness, a lot of times people will hear the example with Jesus and Peter and they'll think, so you're just supposed to let someone just take advantage of you over and over and over again? No, that's also not forgiveness. Forgiveness does not imply a lack of boundaries, that you're just out for the world to take advantage of. In fact, Jesus teaches the opposite of this in a lot of cases, that you know, in the parable of the talents, he talks about God giving these different people talents, and that when the people don't produce with their talents, God takes them away. He's not just out to be taken advantage of. There's wisdom involved in how you interact with people. So forgiveness is not justification, giving people an excuse. Forgiveness is not letting yourself be fully taken advantage of all the time. And thirdly, forgiveness is not reconciliation. A lot of times people will say, well, if you forgave them, then you guys will be close. No. Sometimes we correlate forgiveness and reconciliation, and that if someone wronged me, that in order for me to forgive them, we have to pretend like nothing happened. We have to reconcile, we have to reconnect, we have to have a relationship exactly the same as it used to be. Plainly, that's not forgiveness. That's not. That's reconciliation. Another good thing, a different thing, not forgiveness. When we ask what is forgiveness, forgiveness is actually a very simple concept, but it's preloaded with a lot of those things that we just talked about it not being. So drop justification, drop being taken advantage of or lack of boundaries, and drop reconciliation off, and let's ask, what is forgiveness? You strip it all the way down, what do we have? Forgiveness, based on, if you look up the Greek word or the Hebrew word, they'll both be tied to justice, right? Forgiveness is intimately tied to a sense of justice. When this word is used, especially in the Bible, All it is, this is it. This is the whole of forgiveness. It is the canceling of a debt. Someone owes you a debt, they owe you something, and you cancel the debt. They no longer owe you that debt. Here's a couple of implications on that. It requires nothing from the person that wronged you. In order for you to forgive somebody, they don't have to do anything. Because forgiveness isn't reconciliation, and forgiveness isn't justification. Forgiveness is simply canceling a debt. So, to put it in financial terms, if Chandler owes me $100 and he hasn't paid me in a couple weeks, if I am to forgive him, that doesn't mean I need a written apology where he says, hey man, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pay that back. Forgiving him means you don't owe me anymore. That's it. Forgiveness is canceling a debt. It does not require apology. It does not require reconciliation. Chandler does not owe me $100 in case anyone was concerned. And even if he did, I'd have to forgive him at this point because I'm preaching about it for crying out loud. Listen, forgiveness at its very base, most fundamental, is the canceling of a debt. So if someone hurts you emotionally, you cancel their debt. They don't have to make it right. They don't have to fix it. That's what forgiveness is. Anything else is more than forgiveness. And there's obviously a time for those, but we're talking about one part of this today. Because Jesus sees reality in light of Christians oozing forgiveness all the time. So we need to know what forgiveness is. Forgiveness, simply put, is canceling a debt. Like if the preacher goes long today, you all forgive him. Okay, good. We're understanding. Okay, so that leads us then to the next question, because all that did was make me think, okay, Jesus really is nuts. Not only is he saying that we need to forgive all the time, constantly, but he's saying that doesn't require anything from anyone else? That I need to just cancel all of my debts? That's so far outside of my understanding of reality. When I am hurt or taken advantage of, or if someone owes me something, if I forgive them, if I cancel that debt, I don't get the thing, whatever it is they owe me. I don't get the apology. I don't get the groveling at my feet that I so desire. I don't get the emotional cry it out and hug it out. I don't get the payment that I was owed. If I forgive, I lose. But Jesus seems to think if you forgive, you win. So how does that make sense? Let's try and make sense of this view of reality that Jesus is putting before us. Why in the world should we forgive? We already said this one, but we should forgive because we've been forgiven. Like God forgave you a great, great debt. You should, in turn, be able to see that other people don't owe you as great a debt. In fact, there's a parable that Jesus tells about this, where a servant owes his master 10,000 days' wages, and he gets forgiven. The debt gets canceled, right? And then he goes home, and he treats his servant who owes him just a few bucks. He chokes him and tells him, pay me what you owe. Logically, when Jesus tells this parable, you're supposed to go, well, he was just forgiven 10,000 days worth of work, and he just choked someone who owed him a couple bucks? We should forgive because we've been forgiven, for sure. Secondly, we should forgive, this is everyone's favorite answer, because God said so, right? Like, there is an element of this where if you don't understand why Jesus is telling you to do something, trust, not blind trust, but trust based on all of the things that he's done well throughout the Bible, should lead you to listen. Just like if you're a child who doesn't understand what hot means and your parent says, don't touch the hot stove, there's an element of, I don't know what hot is, but usually my parents don't want me to be in pain, that all children ignore. Neither here nor there, but you see the element of trust. Because I said so is not void of reason, but it may not be our favorite reason. Still a reason, not our favorite reason. Because I said so, because God said we should forgive, we should forgive. Secondly, because we've been forgiven. Thirdly, because it's really good for you, actually, emotionally. Someone has said holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. When you hold on to the wrongs that people have done you, they stay alive inside of you. They just sit there and they hurt you and they don't ever come out. Forgiveness is actually a way of letting go of the hurt and putting an end to the hurt that someone else has done you. Number 4, why should we forgive? Because it's good for your relationships. We talked about reconciliation, that forgiveness isn't reconciliation, but reconciliation is a byproduct of forgiveness. When you forgive, you open the door for actual reconciliation. And so one of the spots I think shows this really well is in Philippians chapter 4. We don't have time. We don't have time to look at all of this, but I would encourage you, if you do have time, some other time, which you all do, you're all traveling, you can listen to this on YouTube or something. Find the lesson on our YouTube page about find the good. We break down Philippians chapter 4 much more in depth in that lesson, and here's the general idea. Paul is dealing with two people who are not getting along, and his instruction to them is not go find your own places and don't deal with each other, which is how we handle the holidays. His instruction is not force the one who's right to shame the one who's wrong, which is also how we handle the holidays. The answer is find the good in the other person. Whatever things are good or lovely or noble or above reproach, whatever thing is commendable about this person you're mad at, think about those things. Because if you're mad at somebody, say, I'm upset with my dad, and I start asking myself the questions, what is good about my dad? What's commendable about my dad? What is lovely about my dad? That one's harder. What is above reproach about my dad? Listen, you can feel the grudge melt because there's more to that person than just the wrong that they did you. Okay, so it's good for your relationships. Number 5, it's good for the people that you forgive. Matthew 5 and verse 44, Jesus tells us to love our enemies. And there's this little passage in Romans where Paul says, when you love those who hate you, you're heaping burning coals upon their head. Has anybody else read that and thought, yes, vindictive kindness, my favorite kind? Anyone? It's a weird passage because in our context, to put burning coals on somebody's head would just be to make them a couple of the squeaky heads I'm seeing this morning. You know what I'm saying? It would just hurt them and take all their hair, right? So what is Paul actually talking about here is a really important question. Well, there's a context to it, and there's a culture that Paul writes into. He's not writing into the void. And in their culture, if someone didn't have fire, they didn't have life. They didn't have clean drinking water. They would not have been able to have cooked food. They would not have been able to have warmth in the winter. And so there was a custom where people would walk from door to door with, usually they would carry the bowl on their head, and they would ask for coals. And if you loved the person, then you would give them some of your fire, and it would give them life. It would literally sustain their life. So when Paul says to treat your enemies well, and by doing so it heaps burning coals on their head, there's a sense in which what he's saying is when you treat people well, you're giving them life back. You're helping them live. You're not making the person who is mean to you angry with your kindness, which feels like the wrong motivation for kindness. You're giving the person who wronged you life. You're helping them, right? That's, I think, a really important part of this. When you forgive, you are giving people life. You are giving them a life. Has anyone else been on the wrong side the side of needing forgiveness? Yeah? Oh, liars. No one raised their hand. Listen, we've all needed forgiveness, and you know that pit in your stomach when you realize you need forgiveness? And then tomorrow I'm going to walk in and I'm going to see the person that I need. I'll just go in the back door tomorrow. That's what I think I'll do. It's not pleasant to need forgiveness. When someone cancels your debt, what a relief that is for the indebted person. Right, so this is number 5. Number 6, last thing. That this is forgiveness. We referenced this a couple weeks ago. But forgiveness, they've done physiological studies on the body as it relates to forgiveness. And they have noticed a few correlations, and there's some preliminary stuff about some of their findings. A couple of the things that they found, specifically, they would hook people up to these measurements of their body, and they would tell them, think about forgiveness. That was it, right? Just think about forgiving somebody. And what they noticed were lower levels of cortisol, which is the hormone that causes stress or anxiety. They noticed lower blood pressure, lower sweat secretion, which, ew. They noticed less muscle tension. All of these things, simply by instructing a person, think about forgiveness. There's a physiological response that our body goes through when we forgive, right? We feel it emotionally, and our bodies can actually feel it physically. And some even link forgiveness to longer lifespans and an ability to fight off cancer. There are preliminary studies that think that there is a connection. Chase those rabbits, they're fun. That's fun research to do. There's a story I want to read. It's about this guy. I don't know, some of you might know the story. It's about a guy named Wild Bill Cody. Here's the basic story. At the end of World War II, when the concentration camps were opened up, the Allies rushed in to give food and water and take care of these people who were in the camps, right? And despite all of the resources that they were giving these people, every day there were just droves of humans that were dying as a result of the time spent in these concentration camps. This one guy, his name is George G. Ritchie, writes about his experience bringing aid. He says it was one of the most devastating things he's ever done because no matter what you did, you just could not fortify these people enough to save their life after what they had been through. Then he met a guy, Wild Bill Cody. All right, I'm going to read. This is a fairly long reading, but I think it's worth it in light of our lesson on forgiveness. Mr. Ritchie writes about Wild Bill. He was one of the inmates of the concentration camp, but he obviously had not been there long. His posture was erect, his eyes were bright, his energy indefatigable, unable to be fatigued. That's too big of a word for me. All right, since he was fluent in English and French and German and Russian, as well as Polish, he became kind of an unofficial camp translator for us. We came to him with all sorts of problems. The paperwork alone was staggering in an attempt to relocate people whose families, even whole hometowns, might have disappeared. But though Wild Bill worked 15 and 16 hours a day, he showed no signs of weariness. While the rest of us were drooping with fatigue, meaning the Allies, were drooping with fatigue, he seemed to gain strength. "We have time for this old fellow," he would say. "He's been waiting to see us all day." His compassion for his fellow prisoners glowed on his face, and it was to this glow that I came when my own spirits were low. I was so astonished to learn, when Bill's own papers came before us one day, that he had been in Wuppertal since 1939. For 6 years, he had lived in the same starvation diet, slept in the same airless and disease-ridden barracks as everyone else, but without the least physical or mental deterioration. Perhaps even more amazing, every group in the camp looked on him as a friend. He was the one to whom quarrels between inmates were brought for arbitration, and only after I had been at Wuppertal a number of weeks did I realize with what a rarity this was in a compound where the different nationalities of prisoners hated each other almost as much as they did the Germans. As for the Germans, feelings against them ran so high that in some of the camps liberated earlier, former prisoners had seized guns, run to the nearest village, and simply shot the first Germans they saw. Part of our instructions were to prevent this kind of thing, and again, Wild Bill was our greatest asset. Reasoning with the different groups, counseling forgiveness. "It is not easy for some of them to forgive," I commented to him one day as we sat over mugs of tea in the proceeding center. "So many of them have lost members of their families." Wild Bill leaned back on the upright chair, sipped at his drink, and said, "We lived in the Jewish section of Warsaw." He began slowly the first words I had heard him speak about himself. "My wife, our 2 daughters, and our 3 little boys. When the Germans reached our street, they lined everyone against the wall and opened up with machine guns. I begged to be allowed to die with my family, but because I spoke German, they put me in a work group." He paused, perhaps seeing again his wife and children. "I had to decide right then," he continued, "whether to let myself hate the soldier who had done this. It was an easy decision, really. I was a lawyer, and in my practice I had seen too often what hate could do to people's minds and bodies. Hate had just killed the 6 people who mattered most to me in the world. I decided then that I would spend the rest of my life, whether it was a few days or many years, loving every person I came into contact with." I tell you this story because, number one, it's an incredible story of forgiveness. Number 2, this man was so sustained by the way he saw people who mistreated him. He was so sustained by his forgiveness for these people that when the Allies arrived, they thought he had only been there a couple weeks. He had been there for 6 years. Six years. But he forgave. And it has, in reality, an impact on your body and your heart and your mind. All right. Why should we forgive? I think Wild Bill's story puts it beautifully. Last reason why we should forgive, and this ties into our lesson from a couple weeks ago. Forgiveness, let me back up. The world is broken. Genesis chapter 1, God made things good. Genesis chapter 3, 6, 11, humans broke it into oblivion. They separated themselves from God. They separated God's Spirit from themselves. They separated themselves from each other. And that's pretty much the story all the way through the rest of the Bible, is God partnering with some people to try and fix the brokenness that is in all of us. And the brokenness winning over and over and over again. So then, God sends Jesus, and this is his silver bullet. This is the plan from the beginning. God is going to save and heal the world through Jesus. He's going to heal the brokenness that is in us. And his weapon, one of his weapons of choice, is forgiveness. Forgiveness is the weapon that Jesus uses to stop evil. Let me explain how this works. In Genesis chapter 5, Genesis chapter 4, we have the story of the first death in the Bible. It's the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain is jealous of Abel, and so one day he decides to, figure out justice on his own terms, right? And he rises up against his brother, and he kills him in a field, lets his blood run into the ground. One chapter later, there's this guy named Lamech. Lamech says, basically, Cain killed one person. I've killed a whole lot more than that. I'm going to need a whole lot more protection than Cain. If God protected Cain, he's going to have to protect me 7 times as much. Lamech was the first person to take 2 wives. It seems as though he's the first one to feel women were property rather than people. Big problem. Then you see the story that continues, and everyone decided that Cain's way was the right way. If you want something, or if someone makes you upset, you should kill him. By chapter 6, the language the Bible uses is that the whole world was full of violence. If the blood of Abel cried out to God, one human, what did it sound like in the ears of God as the whole world was full of violence and the ground covered in blood? Well, this is what lack of forgiveness does. Naturally, when someone hurts you, we don't tend to get even. We like to get ahead. And then one act of evil led to 2. 2 acts of evil led to 3. 3 acts of evil led to 4. And before you know it, you have Genesis chapter 6, where the whole world is full of violence. Forgiveness stops it. If you interject forgiveness at any point along the way, it is an immediate decrease in evil in the world. If you cancel the debt that someone owes you, and instead of getting ahead or getting even or getting your own vengeance, if you cancel that debt, evil stops. It ends no more. It's done. That doesn't mean you can vanquish evil by forgiving just you by yourself, but imagine if everyone took this approach. How quickly would evil fade in the world if we all decided that Jesus was right about reality? That choosing forgiveness, that's the right thing to do. The other thing forgiveness does, the way that it heals the world, is forgiveness changes you. It changes you on the inside. It transforms you and the people around you. I mean, the best example, I've used this example a number of different times, but the best example that I can think of that is like in our common shared movie history, because that's most of my history, is Les Mis. Les Miserables, the scene at the beginning when Jean Valjean's been in prison and then he's taken in by the priest and the priest feeds him and gives him a bed. And in the middle of the night, Jean Valjean steals all the silverware and he's caught in the street. And the officer brings him back to the priest and he says, "He told us you gave him the silverware?" And Jean Valjean sits there knowing he's either going to be killed or in prison for the rest of his life because he decided to steal. And the priest says, "Well, of course. And you ran off before I could give you the most expensive pieces. You forgot the candlesticks." Debt canceled. In the movie, in reality, that kind of forgiveness does something to the heart of a person. It can change and transform a person's. What kind of person is going to continue to give to me when I have stolen from them? What do they know that I don't know? What do they have that I don't have? How was he happy when I stole from him? That's what forgiveness can do in the heart of a person. And not just in the heart of the people that you forgive, but in your own heart as well. Forgiveness leads to transformation. It's not a formula like you forgive and then you're better. It's a transformation. It's a process. It's, might you call it a renewing of your mind, like Paul says in Romans chapter 12, that we're supposed to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. This is what forgiveness really is, okay? Forgiveness is not a moment. It's not a thing that you do. That's typically how we think of it, because we think about justification, reconciliation, and a lack of boundaries, right? But forgiveness, the canceling of a debt, is not just a thing you do once. It is an entire view of reality. It is a lifestyle. It is a process that you do every day, all the time, and it changes you, and it changes the people around you. It changes the world. Jesus is espousing a view of reality that when you buy in and do it, can transform you, your relationships, and the world that you live in. That's really good news. It makes a little bit of sense of the gospel, the good news of Jesus. Wow. Would you like to hear about a view of reality that can heal the brokenness inside of you, mend the relationships that have been hurt, and make the world a better place? You want to help save the world? I think most people's answer is yeah to that. And we can disagree about exactly what that looks like, but I'm going to stake my claim right here that Jesus is right about the view of reality that says forgiveness makes that happen. Last thing, because we have spent 29, we're booking it. I'm happy with our time. The last thing that we need to talk about, because we've built all the way to this point, is the question of how do you forgive? And the answer to this question is it's not easy. Like, because Jesus is telling you that you need to forgive doesn't just make it like, oh, I'll just start forgiving then. Let me just call my mom tomorrow and just tell her we're good. Let me just pick up the phone on that boss that fired me a couple of years ago and make sure he knows. It's not that easy. It's very, very difficult. It's much like, becoming a parent, learning a new skill, transforming your body through workout. It's like becoming a good spouse. It's like learning anything. It's a process. It is a transformative, long, difficult, mixed in with a lot of failures kind of process. Forgiveness it's like a cycle. I'm going to give you some steps, okay? I'm going to give you some steps, but bear in mind, similar to the cycle of grief, or the steps of grief, you're going to cycle through them, right? You're going to do really well at one and move on to the next, and then you're going to have to back up, and it's going to be an ongoing thing. But here are some, I think, tangible, practical ideas that will help you to forgive anyone who's wronged you. And again, not in a moment, but to help you become a person who forgives, a person whose view of reality is forgiveness. All right, here we go. The first thing, the most important thing, it's not even close. The first thing is you have to be honest. You have to be truthful about what happens. We do justification a lot. Yeah, my mom hurt me, but it's how she was raised. That's justification. That's not forgiveness. You have to be honest. My mom hurt me, and that wasn't okay. That's it. You have to be truthful. Jesus says that the truth will set you free. I believe that's the first part of forgiveness, is being truthful about the situation that you are in, being honest about the person who wronged you. Or all of this can be flipped and said about yourself as well. I wronged them, and I need to forgive myself for that. That's another piece of this that we had to cut out for time. So the first thing, you've got to name the truth. You've got to say the truth. If you are trying to sugarcoat it, I hurt people. No, you destroyed your family. Okay, he hurt us a little bit. No, he took from you a life that you expected to be much longer than it was. Whatever someone has done to you, be honest. You have to be honest. Because if you sugarcoat it or lie about it, you will never actually forgive. And that thing that they did will keep popping up over and over and over again every time you think about it. Okay? Be honest. Second, you need to be able to say, this is part of being honest, what happened was wrong. What they did to me was wrong. You have to say that. You have to be honest enough to say that what happened to me was wrong. It doesn't matter what the debt is. It doesn't matter the relational slighting. It doesn't matter the situation. It doesn't matter if it was an accident, a drunk driving accident. What they did was wrong. Have to be able to say that. The second part of being honest is you have to, like we looked at in Philippians 4, and I would encourage you to look at some more, you have to be able to say that person is more than the wrong thing they did to me. Because that's also true. We have a tendency to pick one of these, right? We'll say, it's fine. Excuse, it's fine. It wasn't even that bad. They didn't mean to do it, right? And we're not honest about what happened being wrong. Or we jump to the other side and we say, they did that wrong thing to me and I hate them and it's all they are ever going to be is a liar. The truth is much more complicated and it requires both of these sides. What they did was wrong. And there's more to that person that wronged me than just that moment. They are more than just the wrong that they did. Both of these have to be held. And when you can say those things, when you can be honest about the situation, then the next step is you've got to evaluate yourself. You've got to reflect. If forgiveness is canceling a debt, then what is the debt, right? Ask yourself the question, what do they owe me? Sometimes it's going to be really obvious. They owe me $100, right? Sometimes it's going to be a little bit more complicated. They owe me the life with my grandfather that I didn't get. They owe me a gentle and compassionate upbringing, right? They owe me time with this person that I find out what if forgiveness is canceling a debt, you got to know what they owe you. Figure it out. Ask yourself, what does this person owe me? And then, this is another part that's really hard. You got to be honest. Ask what you want from them. Because a lot of times we don't like to get even. We like to get ahead. A lot of times what we want is public humiliation for the person who wronged me. I want them to grovel at my feet in front of our whole family so that everyone knows I was. Sometimes what we want from somebody is disproportionate to what they owe us. We got to be honest about that too. Listen. Evaluate what they owe you. Evaluate inside yourself what you want, and then write it. Now, this is not a necessity, all right? These first four, those are pretty necessity, okay? But this one is important and helpful. Write it down. I forgive so-and-so. They took this from me, and I am canceling their debt. That doesn't mean my feelings are going to change immediately. But it does mean that I am going to forgive them. They don't owe me anything anymore. Write it down. It's an incredibly cathartic experience. I made all of our teenagers do this at the retreat, and there were tears. There were tears. Forgiveness is not a moment. Forgiveness is not going through these steps in order and checking all the boxes. Forgiveness is a process. It is a lifestyle. It is a way of seeing the world that Jesus claims is the right way to see reality. It is a transformation that is going to heal you, heal your relationships with others, and heal the world. That's the good news of the gospel. When we talk about the gospel and the good news, yeah, there are a lot of other parts of it. Jesus dying on the cross and his blood washing away your sins and you receiving forgiveness from him because he canceled the debt that you owed God. That's huge. Then living like the gospel is true means forgiving other people and making the world a better place and healing yourself from your brokenness and healing your relationships from the wounds that have been caused. This is the good news. This is another piece of the good news that Jesus came preaching. If you want to hear more about that good news, man, I'll sit here and talk to you. This was only 37 minutes, which is short for me, okay? If you want to talk about it, I'll talk all day or all night. If you need prayers, if you need help forgiving, all this stuff, then this is why we come together and meet together so that we can love each other and work and be transformed together to help heal the world, to help heal ourselves, and to all ultimately look more like Jesus. So whatever you need this morning, come forward. We'll have someone to help you. If you just come while we stand and sing.